He told me, by the way, this is going to be an hour of us just texting each other on our computers, right? Live feed. Oh, no.
Can you remind me why we actually, agreed to this?
No.
We made a terrible mistake.
Huge mistake.
A really huge mistake. Whoa.
Whoa.
Oh, hot mic. Hot coffee, hot mic. Are we branding is what we're doing?
Am I on?
Oh, I got dust in my eye.
Am I on? Can people hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? I go like this. I love your podcast, by the way. This is very strange to be.
You are all witnessing history, incidentally, because this is the first time I probably, in my entire life, ever drunk out of a mug without washing it first. Which is like a personal achievement.
And it's like a regular occurrence for me.
Hot coffee sterilizes, you're going to be fine.
Oh, no.
Don't let them think about it. Fine.
No.
I don't know what to do this.
It's your science and your facts and your...
Yes.
We're actually going to plan on reading the pamphlet for the next hour.
We're going to go through all 8 tones, reading it, see what happens. You tell us what your favorite is.
Command, tone the heavy.
Yeah.
No, that was a liturgical joke.
This guy knows what I'm talking about.
Am I right? So are we good?
Are we good?
Incidentally, are we just kind of we're doing our thing?
Awesome. It takes us a little while to get into. So how are you guys? Can we just go around again and introduce ourselves?
That should shave off about 45 minutes of this, right? Yeah.
And that concludes this episode's evening of Pop Culture Coffee Hour.
Good job,
I
everybody.
say when I first edited their podcast, I had to cut out 45 minutes
Yeah.
before we begin.
Yeah, a lot of umming and ahhing and stammering and the occasional bathroom break when we forget to go to the bathroom before we start recording.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we don't even have coffee. That's our little secret.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just Pop Culture Water Hour.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, during Lent.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't drink coffee during Lent?
No, I drink coffee during Lent.
I say, how do you survive? That's
Barely.
Yeah.
Barely.
Well,
I'm terrified right now. Can I confess that?
Yeah, me too. It's kind of overwhelming.
I was joking before that this is a mistake. Huge mistake.
Yeah.
Huge mistake.
Turns out we underestimated how big that mistake was going to be. It's even still.
Yeah. I wish I thought more about the future. Just planned.
Well, there's a podcast, I don't know if you've heard of it, called Time Eternal, that it's really helpful about that kind of stuff. So,
just life advice and productivity, because that's what I feel like I just made.
Right. Yeah.
So meta. That was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we do that, I guess. Well, it really is very much an honor to be kind of kicking off this whole thing with you all, and it's great because I converted to Orthodoxy at 16 and started listening to Ancient Faith Radio a lot in college, and it's for so long been such an impact on me, and it's very strange to be sitting here. So thank you.
I converted when I was 6 months old. So
Yeah.
beat you to it.
Against your will, too. They tried to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, they succeeded.
Yeah.
They succeeded.
No.
I love the darkness. This is really, really weird because there's so many road trips and things that I've done just listening to Ancient Faith going on in the background, and now we're drinking out of Ancient Faith mugs.
Our very own.
Yes, on an Ancient Faith dual purpose program.
Yes.
That is now in multimedia.
Yes.
Which is weird.
It's my mom's birthday today, by the way. So
Happy birthday,
hi, Mom.
She's not going to see this until... Can we air this next year? Can we air this next year? Sorry, I didn't want to burst your bubble there.
No.
So what are we doing? We're here. We're doing our thing.
We're here.
Whether we like it or not.
Yeah, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So we're following up now on our last episode that we did. Right, which we did a Daredevil episode, which came out, I guess, last Wednesday, as of the day that we're recording this.
Yesterday.
What?
Came out yesterday.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Is today Thursday?
Today's Thursday.
Yeah, that's
Again, there's a really great podcast called Time Eternal. I really recommend.
I know I legit lost track of time. That's kind of scary. It came out yesterday. Oh, wow. It feels like so much has happened since yesterday.
A lot has happened since yesterday.
At least 24 hours worth of things have happened since yesterday.
I can attest to that.
So do we have any feedback from yesterday?
I thought the release of it happened.
I concur,
Yeah.
I think. Did anybody listen to the last podcast and has like a gripe? We can always take no gripes.
Yeah. No listeners.
No listen, yes. No, we joke about like the dozen that sort of listen to us.
Turns out that's actually a very fair estimate.
Yes,
Yeah.
we've multiplied it by force. You can't see this, but the doors have locked.
Yeah.
You're stuck here, friends. So yeah, I don't know. We can just kind of like go into the next thing that we're going to do today.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Which is
The Simpsons.
The Simpsons.
The Simpsons.
Any Simpsons fans? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, how do you not be a fan of The Simpsons, right? It's been on the air for 27 years.
Oh, it's possible.
I guess that's true.
You
But
can fall into and out of love with The Simpsons a lot of times in 27 years.
Yeah, often in the same season.
Yeah, true.
But it's still on, and I mean, it's one of the. Is it the longest running show in America?
Probably.
Or is there any longer one? I don't know of any other long. It's certainly the longest running cartoon.
Didn't Murder, She Wrote go for a long time? No?
Law and Order.
Law and Order.
Law and Order's been on for a long time. But it's certainly the longest running cartoon. Steve, what was your history with The Simpsons? Do you remember the first time you saw it?
I actually do. I vividly remember this the first time. So like this is also a sign of age, I suppose. But I remember The Simpsons before they were The Simpsons. I remember The Simpsons when they were shorts on the Tracy Ullman Show, which was a thing. And okay, some people were alive for the Tracy Ullman Show. Way to go. So this is like, I remember I was in my godfather's backyard. And we were having some sort of like summer barbecue family grill-em-a-bob thing, right? And they took like the industrial extension cord and they plugged it into the house and like they wheeled the TV out, like the old cathode ray tube, because this is like 1987 or 1988 or whatever it was. And they're watching the Tracy Ullman Show. And then like in the midst of this, because I thought the show was terribly boring, but I was also 7, like I wasn't interested in the Tracy Ullman Show. And then these like weird orange creatures appeared for the first time. And like I remember how mesmerized I was by it, and I thought this was like the weirdest thing ever. And like the dad is tucking the son goodnight, but he's like making the kid really scared. And I don't understand this all the way, but like I like it. And here I am now, 28 years later, I suppose.
Dreaming about scaring your own children one day.
Yes, yes. Isn't that the point?
Yeah. And
you have children to terrorize them.
Exactly.
That's like dad problems.
Yeah, it is.
But that was it. Like it was when it was still just a concept, and then it got picked up, and then it became a show. And Tracy Ullman actually apparently sued The Simpsons.
What?
Yeah, because she said she wanted to cut up the profits because she was responsible for their success, which didn't fly in court.
No.
So justice prevailed, but now it's still going strong, 27 years later. But I remember that. Like I have terrible memory, and but I remember as a 7 or an 8-year-old kid just staring at this curved screen, because that's back when screens were curved still.
Yeah.
And like watching like these weird little people, and like I don't know what but it touched something in my brain, and it's still touching it to this day. Like it's just, I don't know. It's been a huge part of my childhood. I feel like my own sort of humor and my own just like understanding of the world is so shaped by this eternal, unending show that's just going to outlast the rest of us.
Indeed it will. So did you like watch it all the way from the time that you were a kid, and then
No.
or did it?
So I have to confess, I lost faith. I fell out of love with The Simpsons after a while.
Yeah.
We had a rough patch, and just like the sparks weren't flying anymore, and I'd like come home, and I'd turn on the TV, and The Simpsons just weren't making me laugh the way that they used to.
Yeah, no,
but like,
they did have a few rough seasons there.
well, I feel like they were great for the first like 7 or 8 seasons, and then they sort of lulled, and then they tried to do the movie thing, and I mean, we watched a couple of the recent ones to like just kind of understand where it is right now. But it's I don't know, it doesn't have the spark and the character that I feel like the original show had. And we can talk about a little bit more of why that was. But
Sure.
I don't know, I go way back. How about you? Do you remember like when you first saw an episode?
I do remember that. I was 9 years old and in my cousin's basement, and like all good things that happen to 9-year-olds in cousins' basements, I guess. I was. Can I
sure how to read that.
back? Yeah. No, I meant like discovering
very
like
different
Back to the
childhoods.
Future. I meant like discovering Back to the Future. Anyway, but I remember like seeing The Simpsons for the first time, and then my parents came downstairs, and they had already known about The Simpsons, and absolutely just flipped out that I was watching.
Yeah.
That I was watching. I grew up in an evangelical tradition, but I was told that I could not at all watch The Simpsons. Like it was for sure forbidden in my house. I think something because of Bart Simpson just being this kind of disrespectful hellion.
Yeah.
And telling people to eat his shorts.
How vile.
Yeah.
How unhygienic.
I know. And now we're like,
Says the guy who doesn't want to drink out of the unwashed mug.
Yeah. So I wasn't allowed to watch it, but I remember. I definitely remember seeing it. And I think probably part of it was because I was told that I couldn't watch it, and so I.
Little forbidden fruit kind of action.
Exactly. But then I started watching it really in college, or maybe even when I was a senior in high school or so. I bought one of the box sets of DVDs, and that was really my first exposure to The Simpsons. I think I might have bought season 3, something like that.
So you kind of got it in
4.
retrospect.
Yeah. And I remember for me when I watched Marge versus the Monorail, that episode with the monorail. Anyone? Monorail.
Yes.
Monorail. Yeah. That was probably the episode that I went, I love this.
Yeah.
This is great.
So what about that episode hooked you?
I don't know, maybe the music. I don't know.
You just like musical theater?
Yeah. That's got to be it.
Which is okay.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, I think that I had this idea of what cartoons were for, and that show, that episode in particular, I think kind of opened that door to me a little bit more of what cartoons could be about, and it sort of played with the form, and I don't know, the content was funny, and I was in.
Yeah.
I was a believer.
Yeah. No, I had a lot of the same pushback to The Simpsons when I was a kid. Like a lot of the adults in my life just didn't like me watching it, which is interesting. Like I don't know if this is just a statement of how the cultural needle moves over time, because The Simpsons are so tame compared to a lot of the other stuff that's on TV,
right,
and
yeah.
like it struck people as scandalous, which I still don't understand though, because there were a few things, I guess, that you can argue were slightly subversive about The Simpsons, like the character of Homer, who's sort of like the oafish, dopey dad, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and there was sort of like this kind of subversive deconstruction about some familial norms, I guess, that existed in the show, which rubbed people the wrong way. But I think that was for a reason, and again, we can talk about that. But I feel like it was a step forward for TV because it was a show that transcended other cartoons that existed at the time, as well as a lot of other sort of regular sitcom-y shows, because I felt anyway that you could care about the characters, because TV for a long time, and thank God that this has changed, right? And we talked about this, I think, in a past episode, how Netflix and other streaming things have begun changing the way that we consume TV and the way that they're now produced, right? Because you can watch 10 or 12 episodes in a row, and there's actual stories that are being told. It's not these disconnected, kind of goofy, madcap things that happen in a person's life, and then they sort of go on to the next week. I mean, The Simpsons had that. It's not a serial in any sort of sense of the word, but you really got to see a window into people in their three-dimensional vulnerability, I feel like, which occasionally other shows would do. They'd have the special when one of the kids would do drugs or something, right? And Nancy Reagan would appear on the show and tell them not to do drugs, or the bicycle show for different strokes, the very special bicycle show. Remember? Bobby laughs, yeah, because it was terrible. But they'd have I'm not going to say any more about it. Don't Google it. It was an awful episode. But the three-dimensionality in shows would happen in tragedy. But I feel like the Simpsons, because there was always this unpolished veneer of who these people were, that Homer was not a perfect dad, Marge was not a perfect mom, the kids were not perfect kids.
Yeah.
Even Lisa, who comes the closest to being sort of the ideal child, was a very wounded and very just interesting person with her own sort of inner struggle with her family.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the reason The Simpsons mattered. The Simpsons mattered because they told real stories, and as sometimes happens, I guess, it takes a medium that people don't take seriously, like cartoons, for us to sort of break through and not have, I don't know, the two-dimensional, let's wrap this up in 22 minutes, and then, we're going to do something crazy again next week.
Yeah, although I think at one point, I do remember an episode where Lisa makes a joke about that. It seems like no matter how bad things get, it always seems like it takes about a half an hour for us to figure out how to do this, and then things are back to normal by next week.
Yeah.
Which I really love. But yeah, I think you're right. And the thing that I've always loved about The Simpsons, and I think it became particularly clear to me when shows like Family Guy started airing. Anyone ever seen Family Guy? I'm not a fan of Family Guy. I've got to be perfectly honest about it. I mean, I know that there's definitely some like hilarious jokes that they make, but generally speaking, I think The Simpsons is much kinder in its approach to helping us more look at ourselves. Like I think that The Simpsons does hold up. Like you're saying that Homer's not the perfect dad, and so on and so forth. I mean, who among us is, right? And The Simpsons is able to hold that mirror up to us, I think, a little bit more kindly and a little bit more gently, whereas Family Guy, I think, tends to point a finger a little bit more in derision and mocking than maybe we deserve. And so I don't appreciate that about Family Guy. But at The Simpsons, I think you're right. It kind of catches us off guard, right? Like when you give yellow human beings the opportunity to, I mean, I guess they're human beings. They have 3 fingers. My God has 4 fingers. Just saying, if we're made in the image of God, we should all have.
Which is interesting, P.S. though, right? God has a cameo appearance in like 1 or 2 episodes.
And he has 4 fingers.
Well, he has 5.
Well, right. I mean, I was talking about, this is a thumb.
It's a finger.
Jury's out on that one, man. I'm sorry.
It's a digit.
It's okay.
5 digits.
Done. Granted.
Taxonomy over here.
Yeah.
I'm no biologist, but which is cool, right? Because then again, even this subversive show like actually sort of tips their hat to the Almighty in this like really subtle sort of way.
Yeah.
But like subtly.
Yep.
You know, not in this sort of like flamboyantly, hey, look at us. We're kind of like sympathetic to the whole Christian thing.
Right.
But it's cool. It doesn't like draw attention to itself.
Right. Because then even just in the next breath, and I think I was talking with Troy about this earlier, when Bart asks Homer what God was like after that meeting, God says, he had nice teeth, a great smell, class act all the way. That is my God. You know what? I can get on board with that. I love America.
Yeah. No, and it's funny, and I love that. And I don't know, I think the point that you made about Family Guy is a really interesting and an important one too. And I think it's something that's just reflected. I think it's like reflected in our politics and the way that we talk to each other now. That there's sort of a laughing at versus a laughing with. Like I think derisive is the word that you used about Family Guy. Whereas I feel like The Simpsons, and now that I'm at sort of this stage in my life, I guess I would use this language to describe it in retrospect. At least when it was really good. Right? Because I feel like The Simpsons now in season 27 like still gets a chuckle, but I don't think it had that extra like special sauce that it had for a while. It seems to me that The Simpsons was like a song. The Simpsons was a show about repentance in a weird sense. Like it was all of these people who were working through these problems and working through like these traumas in their lives, but love was always the thing that kind of, in not a schlocky, cheesy sort of way, but you know, like no matter how difficult things got between Marge and Homer, they loved each other. No matter how like tightly Homer would choke Bart and like abuse him physically, and sometimes emotionally, right? Like he still loved his child, and like they would still try to make things better. And there was this hopefulness that like even though we are messed up and screwed up in our own particular way, that doesn't necessarily define who we are. And Homer's near alcoholism doesn't necessarily define who he is. Right. And Bart's like rambunctiousness doesn't even necessarily who. Like there's a something, there's a spark that's under there. And that's what I always appreciated about the show from the very beginning, and why I think it was kind of silly for us to be so upset about it because Bart would say, "Eat my shorts," because there's a lot of gold there that I think we missed out on because we were so concerned with like some of the formalistic things about the show.
Yeah, plus shorts are delicious.
Agree to disagree.
So yeah, I think you're right. There is this kind of basic, commitment, I think, to the family life, or at least to.
Are we going warp speed right now? What's just happening? Where's Mr. Sulu?
Great Scott, Marty! I just came back from the future! The commitment to the family life, and in particular, I think you look at that and you see that first and foremost, I think, in Marge and Homer's marriage. That as we were getting ready to kind of do this, we went back and watched some of the older episodes.
We watched The Simpsons for work.
Yes,
it's just like a boyhood dream, and it happened.
It is. and now we're talking about it, and you have to listen to it, which is the second part of the dream. And we got mugs.
Yes. Yes.
But we went and watched one episode from, I don't remember what season, but the episode is titled The Last Temptation of Homer.
Season 5, episode 9.
Season 5, episode 9.
In my outline, which I have up on my computer.
Look at that. How about them apples?
Johnny on the spot.
Johnny on the spot, named Steve. And
Johnny's not named Johnny. Why are you calling him that?
But anyway, so there's this this is hilarious scene, right, where Homer, well, the way the episode kind of gets set up is that Mr. Burns comes under a little bit of speculation because only men work at the power plant, and so he has to bring on a woman into the power plant who's voiced by Michelle Pfeiffer, and she comes on, and Homer finds himself really attracted to her, and because she's basically the female version of Homer. So
Yeah.
you know,
As absurd as that
yeah,
sounds.
exactly. She's eating a donut, and he goes and tries to talk to her, and she just says, "Can't talk, eating." You know, and he's like, "Oh, I do that too." You know, it's got these weird moments. But anyway, they get sent on this work trip together, and he's trying not to imagine what his life would have been like had he ended up with, I think her name is Mindy.
Mindy, yeah.
Mindy, and General Clink from
Colonel Clink.
Colonel Clink, yeah. I don't know. Is that some other reference that I missed somewhere along the line?
Yeah.
Hogan's Hero. Yeah. So 30 years old. I'm sorry. He shows up and takes Homer on this voyage to go to see, like, this is what your life would have been like had you not married Marge, and it's like infinitely better. He's like living in a mansion playing tennis with Mindy, and Marge is the president of the United States.
Yeah. Homer's like inexplicably speaking with an accent.
I'm having so much fun. Me too, darling.
Ever so much
How
fun.
about you, Jeeves? Are you having fun? Thrilled. You know? Brilliant.
Yeah.
But by the end of the episode, they win this dinner as the king and queen of like the nuclear energy ball or something.
So
like
random.
Yeah, totally. And they have to go out to dinner together. And he gets a fortune cookie that just says, "You will find happiness with a new love." And he's really in despair about this because he feels like the dessert is this like prophetic message to him. And Mindy gives him an option and says, "Well, you don't have to listen to the dessert." And he goes, "Well, but they're so sweet." And she says to choose what he really wants. And so the episode ends with him and Marge together in this hotel room, which is like a really, I think, a beautiful kind of closure to that episode that could have been, you know, kind of a completely different way. But there is this basic holding on to fidelity, like the importance of fidelity, and I don't think that's something that you see a lot in popular culture. That there really is. I think we tend to be driven toward, at least in cultural expressions, more towards authenticity, like living more from your id, you know, and doing kind of expressing yourself in the most authentic way possible. But I love that the church doesn't call us to self-expression, but towards self-denial, right?
Yeah.
Like toward asceticism rather than authenticity. And as we deny ourselves, we actually receive our true selves, right, in Christ, who is the faithful one, the one who is faithful to us.
Yeah.
And to his Father, and that's deeply moving to me to get that image kind of given to us by yellow people with 3 fingers.
Because sometimes they're the jokers are the ones who give us the truth in the way that others won't.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But that's why the flashback, no, not flashback, but the sort of like the dream sequence with Colonel Clink, I think is so powerful too, right? Because this is a temptation that like everybody has, or I think at least a lot of people have on some level, right? In this particular situation, it's Homer about his marriage, right, and trying to think if things were better if he married somebody else. But I feel like it's a temptation that we second guess ourselves, like, what if I took this other job? What if I took this whatever? What if I, wasn't friend with this person anymore? We create these like alternate realities in our head, which are not real, obviously, right? They're just imaginings, and
they're almost always better than like whatever we currently have.
Which
right?
totally happens in this one. Like his life is exponentially better if he leaves his wife and he goes and for both of them, not just for him, right? It's like it's
Marge
not
is
a
president.
It's like it would even be generous of him to leave Marge, according to this, right? Because she gets to be president afterwards. And yet, I think the cool thing though is that it's this challenge to not to find authenticity or not to find the sort of superficiality the way we sometimes talk about it, but the sanctification and the sort of like authentic self in like the deepest existential sense of the word, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe Colonel Klink was telling the truth, right? And maybe Homer would be wealthier and he would be sort of like more put together and he would be healthier because he's playing tennis.
And British.
And he'd have a sophisticated, debonair sort of accent about him. And Marge would be influential and like she would be out of the kitchen, right? And she'd be doing something bigger because they sort of play sometimes with those kind of stereotypes as well with like the character of Marge. But even so, it's in the moment of that reality, right, where the hard work of asceticism is done. And even though, like, on some level, it might be better for Homer to be more wealthy, like, Marge is the one that has been tasked with saving him, right? And Homer has been tasked with saving Marge. And Marge only really knows herself by looking into the eyes of Homer and vice versa. And so like it would be an abandonment of like the true ascetic struggle. It would be an abandonment of the true attempt to find their true selves in Christ, like you were said, right, in Him, for the sake of this other sort of shallower thing. And I love that they make the stakes so stark. It's not that things would be marginally better. They would be incredibly better, and yet still that's the wrong choice because it's still an illusory thing. And I love that. I mean, that's just powerful because it's like that's kind of like the sin of despondency on some level, right? Like we're always second guessing ourselves. Like, what if I married somebody else? What if I took this other job? What if I moved out of this city? Whatever it might be. But like, none of it is real. And the church ultimately is about authenticity, not in this self-created sense, but in like stepping out of the void, right? And that's how Homer steps out of his void. As rough as he might be, it's Marge that is like walking on this journey with him, and like that's so beautiful to see, like you said. That was a good episode. You should go watch it. Season 5, episode 9, The Last Temptation of Homer, which is also just a fun title.
Indeed.
But the opposite happens as well, though, right? Because Marge is also tempted to cheat on Homer, which I think is interesting too, that they play with both of these things. There's this really fun episode from season 1, episode 9. It's called Life on the Fast Lane, and this is when Homer, being the guy he is, buys Marge a birthday present, and he buys her a bowling ball. And of course, he has the name Homer inscribed onto the bowling ball, and he buys for his wife, right? And like he tells these stories and everything. And of course, she, to sort of prove a point, goes and begins taking lessons and tries to learn how to bowl.
Oh, that's right.
And there's like the debonair, sort of like smooth bowling coach who begins to seduce her, right? And
they all are that way. Have you ever noticed that? All those bowling coaches.
Very smooth.
There's a stereotype, and they're rightly so. It's right to have that stereotype.
Rooted in reality.
Coaches.
Yes, rooted in reality. French bowling coaches in particular.
Man.
That's right.
Aren't they all French?
Make sure your bowling coaches are German because. But anyway, like this happens, and of course Homer is constantly like not attentive to her needs, right? And this Jacques is like he's so smooth and he's so caring and he makes her feel loved and wanted, and so she has this really like. This moment where she tries to figure out who is she, and she's driving along this road, and she constantly sees these signs of eternal love, and she sees like this couple sitting together. She sees these two skeletons holding hands in like the windows of some store, right? Yeah, literally. And she has all of these reminders of like eternity, and how this one moment of pleasure is not going to be at all worth any of this. And so she ends up turning around, and she goes to the power plant, and Homer sweeps her off her feet, and he has a very classic line where he says, "If anybody's looking for me, tell my boss I won't be back for 10 minutes." And then walks out. It's hilarious. And they reconcile again, And again, I love that she had this choice, this opportunity to have something better, right, or at least something apparently better. But what was actually true was life. What was actually, something that was going to be unending. Not a momentary fling, right? But to actually, like, for those skeletons to hold hands one day, for her to be able to like embrace Homer into the grave and then embrace him out again. And I don't know, that just like gives me like goosebumps even thinking about it again. It's just it's so cool, and it was again a kid's show, an underappreciated, or at least maybe appreciated for the wrong reasons, kid's show.
Yeah. There is this kind of I don't know I mean, now that I'm married and have kids myself and doing the family thing,
That whole business.
That whole business. It really is amazing to me that the permanence of it. So much of my life until having a family, like I could just move wherever I wanted or do whatever I wanted, or kind of be having the illusion that who I was didn't affect other people. That I could just kind of go home and be by myself and like stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning watching Netflix, and that was normal. But there is, I think, that being bound to one another, that going through things that The Simpsons really touches on in a really big way, and not just in the marriage, but also in that parenting kind of capacity. Because you can see how Homer's own flaws are so exposed.
Oh yeah.
Right, in his parenting, as you were talking about with how he strangles his son, or how he's an alcoholic, and he has one of those great lines about alcohol where he actually raises a glass to alcohol and says, "To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems." And there's something to that, I don't know, that as I watch The Simpsons now from the eyes of a parent, I can see in myself some of the tendencies, not towards alcoholism, but just towards kind of. Is this why you've all called me here today? Is this an intervention? But just kind of the desire to, because his thing is he just really isn't really there as a dad.
No.
By and large, which I think is why both Bart and Lisa kind of tend to call him Homer. Yeah. But even in one of the most recent episodes, the one with Ralphie's birthday, Ralphie had a birthday party recently. We'll talk about Ralphie.
Lovable Ralphie.
Good old Ralph Wiggum.
Sweet Ralphie.
Yeah. So he had a birthday party and got a big treehouse from Chief Wiggum, and you get a flashback to when Homer first built Bart's treehouse, and what he did was he put just like a treehouse in a little bush, and he says, "Well, I've done my job. Now it's your turn, tree." Like waiting for the tree to grow up to be a treehouse. And I'm not saying that's my parenting technique. However, I resonated with that. I was like, well, I've done my part. But there is none of that. There is this stuckness, for lack of a better word. Anyone got a better word than stuckness? That makes it sound like such a prison. But rootedness, yeah. And I think that you did it.
Podcast over.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, phew.
Right. But the being bound to one another and having to work through these things together, even as a parent, it's really powerful. And I think that actually in some ways speaks to maybe even why The Simpsons has been so long-lasting, that there is this internal commitment even within the show, that now we as a audience are still committed, even if we're like, you know what, it had some good seasons, it had some bad seasons, but they've been with us and we're all family now, right?
Yeah.
All of us. Simpsons are our family.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's, because we touched on this earlier, I think that's the reason why, or at least my understanding of why the characters in The Simpsons are flawed, and why that's so important to the story that they're trying to tell. Because it's important for certain pieces of fiction to have kind of like the idealized characters, like the Atticus Finch and whatever, because it's important to sometimes have them, like the heroic model who does what is right and is somebody that we can aspire to be. But the truth is that most of us aren't that, right? Most of us are still much rougher lumps of clay that are still in the process of this. And that's why I think it's something to see Homer, as terrible of a dad he is, right? As much as he mails it in. Do you remember the gorge jumping episode?
Yes.
Right? It's Homer who, so the gorge jumping episode is another early one where Bart wants to be like a daredevil, and he just keeps like jumping over things on his skateboard, and then he eventually gets it into his head to jump over Springfield Gorge, which is like the Grand Canyon, right? And obviously he's going to die if he does this. And what does Homer do? Homer, who chokes his son, who is emotionally absent, right? He pushes Bart off of the skateboard, and he gets on the skateboard, and he takes one for his son, basically. And then hilarity ensues as he falls down the canyon, obviously,
Multiple
right?
times.
Multiple
Yeah.
times, yes.
After the helicopter comes and tries to airlift him out, and then it breaks, and he comes goes.
And then the ambulance crashes into a tree and he rolls out again. Right? Yes. And it just repeats it again and again. But But that's the thing, like, there are these really powerful moments of redemption where you can tell, like, okay, he might not be good at loving his son, but he really does love his son.
Yeah.
And that's how most of us are. Like, I might not be good at loving my mom or my sister or my wife or my friends or my grandparents or whatever it is, and hopefully I have a couple of those moments of redemption.
Yeah.
But I don't know, as a viewer, in many ways I can more identify with a schlocky sort of Homer than I can with, like, the really noble Atticus, because I aspire to nobility, but I don't know, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And there's virtue, I think, in seeing somebody, like, wrestle through that. Not to embrace the flaws, right, but to acknowledge them and to have those moments when the sun actually does break through. It's like the thing that you talked about actually in the last podcast, the Daredevil podcast, the alcoholic monk, right?
Oh, yeah.
Was not a model of asceticism or virtue in, like, the surface level sense, but the fact that he put in all of that work and he was able to get himself down to however many drinks it was, like, that's all of us, I think, on some level. You know, if we can at the very least take a couple of steps towards God, and some of those steps are hard. You know, like, who knows? Like, it might be hard for Homer to commit to his family in the way that he should. It might be hard for Homer to be present there. Like, he's clearly running from something with all of the time that he spends at Moe's bar, right?
Yeah.
From, like, an empathetic sort of sense, like, but when he steps up, he steps up.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing to see. Because I don't know, like, as idealized, I guess, as some of the other sort of, like, shows that exist, I don't know if you have the same moments of virtue in, like, a stereotypically kind of virtuous show, like, I don't know, pick your other kind of shows from the, like, the Huxtables or the Seavers on whatever, or even that, right? Like, the sort of quintessential clean-cut family. But I don't know, most of us are doing a lot more wrestling than that. I don't know. I could be making excuses for it, and I'm just kind of, like, making up reasons for why I love The Simpsons. But I don't know.
I feel so good about the kind of dad I am. See, Homer does it.
But it resonates.
Yeah,
I think there's something very human about it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's not a subversive thing to present flaws in a non-idealized sense. I think it's just it's genuine. It's real. You know, we have a lot.
I mean, I think one of the things that the show does really well. Again, I've been thinking a lot. I mean, you and I have talked about this with authenticity and self-expression and kind of the world that we live in now. Generally, people are pretty entitled to their authentic self-expression, and that's why the only real sin today is intolerance.
Yeah.
You know, that, like, well, I'm just expressing myself, man.
Get off my back.
Yeah, man. And so there's not really any sense that what we do and who we are really affects other people. You know, that all there is you just need to express yourself. But The Simpsons really did a good job of that. Even the episode when Marge has the gambling problem, she's off at the casino all the time and away from the family. And I think, as I recall, right, the way that it kind of ends is Homer goes in with the family to try to interrupt, and it's the relationships with her family that kind of end up breaking the spell of the addiction over her as they kind of seek to reach out to her and connect with her in a new way, which is really interesting, because I don't know about the science behind this. Father David, you would probably know better about the addictions kind of theory of one of the big driving forces of addiction is simply loneliness, being isolated, and the connection is usually what is most healing for those who are under the spell of an addiction, and there's even that truth present with the gambling episode. And I wonder, again, for us as relational beings, like what would that look like for a community of people to reach out to those with addictions in a new way, rather than just you know what I mean? Like, the thing that we tend to do with addictions is kind of send them away. So
lock them up.
Lock them up. Send them to rehab or whatever. But I don't know. I think that we get into some of those really beautiful kind of expressions in The Simpsons that what we do does impact other people, and we can reach out and bring people out of that a little bit better than maybe we are doing.
Yeah, possibly. And I think it's cool. Like that episode too, they acknowledge the ways that the family begins like struggling when Marge kind of succumbs to the gambling addiction. That she's supposed to help Lisa with like a school project, and she lets her kids down and she lets her husband down, and like they actually like these are not sort of like just zany things that happen in kind of a consequence-free sort of world.
Yeah.
I mean, like the strain and the toll that it takes on the family like is actually there.
Right.
And I mean, they sort of like it's presented, I guess, in a moderate sort of way, and they can sort of poke a little bit of fun at it, but it's there. And I think again that wound, like the presence of the wound, is what has to be there for a little bit of that healing to take place. You know, because like that scene of the family coming together wouldn't have the same sort of power if there wasn't sort of any alienation to be then reconciled.
Right, yeah.
You know, and like that's ultimately like the story. There has to be some level of sin for the act of repentance to really like mean anything.
Yeah, which is what you were saying, that this show has been a show of repentance. That there, and there really is like that safe kind of environment that we don't have in our lives, where things can get wrapped up nicely in 22 minutes.
Yeah.
Where you can really do some great things and explore some really great territory, you know, in 22 minutes. But yeah.
I don't know. So those are some of the big ones, and like I feel like there's other fun like episodes that we can talk about. There's like family dynamics, like they went on a family vacation. Like it's life. I think sort of social communal life just gets poked at from all sorts of different directions. You know, it's like the Homer-Marge relationship. It's the relationship between the kids. The monorail episode I think is so cool because you have like this really interesting just view of a community too. And one of the things that I really enjoy about The Simpsons is the way that it makes fun of us too as viewers. Like it makes fun of democracy a lot. It makes fun of politics a lot. And I mean, like that's us really, and that's us having a joke at ourselves. Like one of my favorite bits in The Simpsons is, it's actually not the monorail episode. I think an even better example of politics. The Halloween episode where the two aliens, Kang and Kodos,
then they run for office.
They kidnap Bob Dole and Bill Clinton, and they sort of like put on like costumes to look like that, and they run for office. And so they stack the deck, and their thinking is that basically whoever gets elected, like they're going to win, and they're going to subjugate the earth that way. And Homer is sort of privy to it because he gets abducted, and he tells everybody like right before the election day that no, don't vote for them because they're both aliens. And so they're unmasked, right? They're unmasked, and everybody knows this, right? And so they're standing there, and then the aliens just like start laughing, and they say, "What are you going to do? Vote for a third party?" And then the other one says, "Go ahead, throw your vote away." And it cuts to Ross Perot, and Ross Perot puts his fist through his hat. And then it cuts to like after the election, and they're hauling these giant blocks to build these like monolithic pyramids. Right. And Homer's like, "Don't blame me. I voted for the other guy." You know, that's us. That's us now in this election cycle as well. Like it's the same lather, rinse, repeat. And I love the fact that The Simpsons can sort of poke fun at us, like love us as viewers, but also kind of say, "Hey, we need to talk."
So overall, I mean, it sounds like you and I would probably both agree that The Simpsons portrays family life in a relatively positive light.
Or at least like a three-dimensional light.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think positive and hopeful.
Right. Yeah. Not like it's a barrel of laughs and it's super great, but there are some real struggles and some real pain. But ultimately, that it's good. Yeah. Right. It's a good thing. But do you think that that's the general thing that is given in culture? Like, would you generally say that family is portrayed to be good?
In like a sort of like general cultural sense?
Yeah.
I think it's probably
other TV shows or movies or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think that a lot of the examples that are coming to mind, I think the answer is for many of them anyway, and I think we could probably think of some examples to the contrary. But yeah, possibly. And I wonder if that is a consequence of just sort of like the wider alienation that we feel as people. Like I feel like even with shows like Modern Family, you know, there's attempts anyway to sort of present the nucleus of our lives as these like familial bonds that are always going to be there. Like there's some sort of bedrock for us, and they're presented in different ways and with different strategies. But I wonder. I'm not sure if this is like, you know, the camera or the pendulum swinging back in the other direction, but as like a reaction to maybe some of our alienation, we're not seeing as much like Seinfeldian sort of humor, where it's just these four atoms that are kind of like friends, but don't have these really deep connections with each other. They're just sort of like these four bouncing balls in a box, right? Like they're in a closed system, but they're not connected to each other in some sort of way. But there's other things from like Game of Thrones, right, which is so clan and family based. I mean, to even like Walking Dead, like there's the relationship of like the son and the father in those things. Like, I don't know. I wonder if because my instinct as you're asking me this is to say, yeah, I feel like a lot of them have some level of positivity, and I wonder if that's because family is one of the things that we have left now as a culture, because we've deconstructed so many things that we have to latch on to those who are bound to us, whether they like it or not.
Right. Yeah. And even while, I mean, I think some of the cultural definitions of what family is. I mean, you talked about Modern Family. Like that's changed a lot. You know, from the Leave It to Beaver days. Yeah. But there is, I think you're right. Even thinking of Modern Family, that they go on these kind of zany paths again. You know, it's almost like the Modern Family is almost like the live-action version of The Simpsons in some way, where they're just always getting themselves into like weird trouble. But they almost always end in this very kind of, I don't know, sentimental way. But there's like an authenticity to the sentimentality almost, where we do sort of have this sense that that's all that there is in some ways, right? Like, well. Or even in Arrested Development, right? That while the family, the Bluth family, is a crazy bunch, and in some ways almost like a burden to be born.
Yes.
That, you know, like from the very first episode, you know, what do I always say is the most important thing?
Family.
Breakfast. Right. Yeah. No. Family. Family is first. Family is the first and most important thing. And I wonder if you're right, that maybe it's first because it's really the last thing now. It's the last thing that we have left, and all that we have is our biology in some ways, or however we're defining family. But, you know.
And I don't know, like maybe the sort of reevaluation over time is a good thing too, because we can, at least in terms of like the American culture, there was a long time when the nuclear family was sort of like the predetermined, like just assumption as to what family was, which if you think about like human culture in the grand course of history, like that's kind of an incomplete version of family. There were always like the cousins and the aunts and the uncles and like the grandparents, and the nuclear family was like a core of a wider thing. So I don't know if we as Americans sort of like pared down this very important, like if you know, to even classical political theory, right? Like the household is like the core political unit, right? To Aristotle and all that. We pared it down to such a sort of like naked, thin level that we're now just realizing like the nuclear family itself is not enough, and this is the reason why there's this desire for wider community. Like this is the reason why people want to live in walkable villages now, right? Like the suburban sort of model even is kind of like fading as an ideal in just American culture widely. Like we want some other sort of deeper connection. We crave it because we trimmed things down to such like an absurd sort of way. We made fun of it. And now we realize that we need more. So I don't know. Maybe the pendulum is swinging in that direction. Just a thought. It's extemporaneous. I haven't thought about any of this before, so I don't know. Clearly. I could be wrong. I don't know. What do we do? How long have we been going? I haven't even timed myself.
From the looks on these people's faces too.
Whoa.
Seriously? Yeah.
I apologize.
No, it's fine.
Okay. You want to we can do our top 5 and end with that.
Yeah.
You want to do questions first and then do a top 5?
Yeah, sure.
That's cool.
Okay, so we're not going to record them because we don't have the capability apparently right now.
Okay.
But we'll do questions and then we'll let you guys do your top 5.
Works for me.
You guys see why we're preparing. We're going to cancel this show. So
it's been a good run.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
27 seasons. We did it.
All right. So if you have a question, just stand up and say it, and then you guys can answer it. And if there's no questions, then we'll just go to the top 5, which is like the usual way the show ends. So go ahead.
Can we choose to not answer the question if we deem not to?
If you don't want to answer the question, just walk out of the room.
Okay. Okay. Just stare awkwardly at the questioner.
I didn't realize that was an option. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have been here.
Just stare awkwardly at each other for an hour and a half. We did it.
Yeah. I could also start listing my Facebook interests. And
MySpace top 8,
Yeah.
go.
Are these questions about The Simpsons? Or?
whatever. Yeah. Like, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about, I guess.
Why we subjected you to this for an
Yeah.
hour and a half, like whatever it was, yeah.
Well, I was just curious what you think about. I mean, you mentioned there seems to be some sort of respect for God, but yet I don't know. They took on Reverend Lovejoy quite a bit. Flanders,
Sure.
almost painfully so. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah. My gut instinct is to say that I think Reverend Lovejoy sort of has it coming in some ways, though. He's definitely far from the model pastor, and I think that he's the sort of maybe unhelpful pastor that a lot of people have been exposed to, and is possibly the reason for a lot of like negative sentiments. So it's kind of like a subversive thing of a person who's not necessarily feeding people terribly well, is my initial thought. I have much more sympathy for Ned Flanders, although Ned Flanders is like a weird, interesting character too, especially I feel like in the way that his children are portrayed, because they come across as just so like robotic and like thoughtless in some ways, whereas where he himself comes across as earnest, but his kids sometimes come across as weird. I don't know. I think that at the very least, they're all sort of caricatures, or however you pronounce it, and I think that like even the fact that we can think about it after an interaction, I think is worth it. Like there's no, because that's the thing. I can't even say definitively bad things about Reverend Lovejoy, because I think that he's been there for the family and helped them at times before. So I can even like retract what I said just like 10 seconds ago. I don't know. They're like humanistic characters, or they're sort of like three-dimensional characters that have foibles that we can pick at sometimes.
Yeah, no, I think I would.
Do it, disagree.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, but I think that a lot of times what I really love about people like characters like Flanders and Reverend Lovejoy is I think one of the dangers, especially as Christians watching The Simpsons, I think one of the dangers we have is to take ourselves way too seriously, like that somehow we're off limits. You know, like, oh yeah, you can make fun of them, but like, oh, are you making fun of Christians now? Like, oh. And the reality is, I think I know people like Ned Flanders, you know, and I know people like Reverend Lovejoy, and I think that's something that we all need to be aware of in terms of what we come across as. I mean, like Flanders has, you know, I love the episode where you learn that his like diddly diddly doodly is really him just like suppressing his anger, and like every time he does it, it's actually just him bottling his rage. And I know a lot of people who are that way. Like they, you know, you meet them and they're just very nice to you, but they just, you know, they would never say anything mean about you to your face because they're Christians. But so that's why they go home and say it behind your back. But I think we need to have that kind of our eyes open maybe to ourselves in some ways, and I think that I don't know. Do we really think that we're not worth making fun of in some ways? Is the question that almost I would respond back, and I do think that The Simpsons holds on to this. In as much as Steve is suggesting that the show is about repentance, I would even maybe say that the show is about Homer as pilgrim, like that there's really this kind of ongoing journey and questioning through things that I really think is respected by The Simpsons in a lot of ways. And I think if we had more integrity, maybe as an institution, not necessarily as the Orthodox Church, but just kind of as Christians, that we would be more comfortable living in our own questions that we usually try to jump out of by giving ready-made answers, and maybe be a little bit more relatable than a Ned Flanders. You know, because I think Flanders is trying to live in his answers rather than to ask the hard questions and to deal with some of the things that stressful for him.
wanna share
I
my
think
favorite-
he would do well.
My favorite Flanders sort of clip as well is there's something happens, right, and Homer says, like, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And one of Flanders' kids throws a stone at Homer, and it hits him in the head, and he goes, got him, Dad! And, like, that's such an interesting portrayal
Yeah.
of those characters, right? On the one hand, like, sinless. On the other hand,
Yeah.
you might have missed that verse.
Right.
Or misunderstood.
Right.
But again, like an interesting tension, and that's how, I don't know.
And there really are just some really fun jokes that they do with religion, particularly. I can think of a couple of Unitarian jokes that I really love. So there's one where like they're having a church festival. I don't know if anyone remembers this, and he's like, we have bubble or Bible gum flavor and Unitarian flavor, and it's just like an empty bowl. And they go, but there's nothing in it. Exactly. And then the other one is Bart's over at the Flanders house, and Rod and Todd are playing this game that they have called the Billy Graham Bible Blasters.
Yeah.
And they just are like shooting Bibles at atheists. And he's like, I got one. No, you just clipped him. He's only a Unitarian. Just like some of the best lines ever. So good.
That's awesome.
But I don't know if that helps at all. I would say that Flanders is an invitation to our questions more than a celebration of our answers or a defamation of our answers, even.
So along the theme of the conference, it was great to see you guys actually create and produce a podcast, so it's instructive. Could you walk us through the steps of how you prepare? You're great at the banter, that's awesome, and your timing is really good, and the improv part of it is really fun to watch. What about on the other side in terms of your preparing? I noticed you're looking at some notes on there. How much of it is scripted and how much of it is extemporaneous?
Preparation is pretty minimal, if I can put it that way. No, but this is intentional. So what we normally do is we come up with like a topic. What we normally do is we'll outline the topic, especially if we want to kind of reference particular things. So what we went back is we each watched. Together we watched like 7, 8, 9 episodes of The Simpsons, something along those lines. So we just had like references to the title, etc. But I think part of the goal, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way that I kind of like see it and explain it is just to present. I'll back up a little bit. I was very privileged to be able to go to seminary, and one of the cool things that I really enjoyed about seminary was that we could sit down for breakfast after chapel and just be really silly and normal with people in their black robes, and Christ just kept percolating up in everything that we talked about, right? In a very natural sense of the word. And I think that sometimes as somebody who like didn't grow up a PK, right? Didn't grow up necessarily in that kind of like intimate circle of people who were that educated in theology, it was so refreshing to just kind of see this sacred secular wall break down, like even in these just like genuine human interactions, that people could be in the world and not of the world in like a very real sense of the word. So the way that I kind of see this project is to simply invite, like that's why it's called, one of the reasons it's called Pop Culture Coffee Hour. It's just like two of us having a conversation, inviting the viewer, the listener in to just kind of participate in it, and to just kind of see that this is like how two guys who are friends, who try to take their faith seriously, who try to like open their hearts up to what God has for them, just like actually interact. And we actually watch The Simpsons, and because we would have these conversations because I've known you now for 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And this is, and it was always how we talked, and it just seemed to me as we think about like what young people need, especially in the church, it's like we need to break down this wall. Like we boxed God into this Sunday morning thing, and we put up these really high and impenetrable walls about like we've taken the city of Jerusalem and we've put God inside of it, and we put the rest of us outside of it. And this was hopefully a way for us to just show people being people. And how, because it's not, I hope it doesn't come across as forced. I hope it's not forced, the way that we connect things to the church. I think in my mind, it's normal and it's kind of like organic. But that's the point. It's just to sort of like, to talk as Christians and to open the listener into that kind of like unguarded, unfiltered, unscripted world. and to hopefully invite them to just begin like putting their relationship with Christ first, and having that inform the way that they approach with all of the artifacts and all of the cultural influences that they deal with on a daily basis. It's more modeling than anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of our guiding theses of the project was, if we truly believe that God is everywhere present and filling all things, then like let's take him at that word and go looking for him in everything. Now, let's just try it. Let's just turn on The Simpsons and see what comes up. And so that's just kind of what our project has been. I wouldn't say we're daring God, but kind of daring him a little bit to show up. That he's going to keep his word. Maybe that's what I'm doing a little bit.
No lightning yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Steve said it. Yeah. But yeah, other than that, our preparation is literally all you have is an outline that you can see. We could even send you the Google Doc if you want.
It's not that interesting.
It's not that interesting.
Like this podcast in real life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
I've got a question. Since you said that you're almost like challenging God, that this was you. Has there been anything, when you're looking at it in that framework, has there been anything that you've done that it's like, this is the most challenging, like this is the hardest, I can't find anything, are you always able to find something, or are there things that's like, there's no value in this at all?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, don't say anything bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there's certain kinds of movies that like you would never like say, well, let's go looking for God. And
Romantic comedies.
Exactly what I was thinking. But I probably would never go watch something like Paranormal Activity, for example. That's a movie that I probably would not go see where I could find God. And it's not necessarily, the reason that I wouldn't do that is not necessarily because I don't believe him to be present there, but because I get very, very scared. And we actually talked about this in one episode, Steve and I, where we both tried, I'm sorry, to watch Breaking Bad. And I just could not do it. I really, really wanted to watch it. But I was a big baby about it, and I couldn't do it because I got too overwhelmed by it, and it was kind of like anxiety provoking, and I didn't want to find myself rooting for the bad guy. And I know that's probably like a very large generalization about what the show was, and I have no doubt. And I remember thinking at the time, like, this is the best television show I have ever watched, and it's a bummer that I'm not going to be able to watch it. It was really hard. But maybe to answer your question a little bit better, I think in some ways there are things that those projects are for other people to do and not for me, for the sake of my own kind of inner stability and inner peace. I think there's things that I've had to say no to.
Why don't you talk about the stronger brother, weaker brother?
Yeah. So, St. Paul talks about those who are able to eat meat that is sacrificed to idols and those who are not. But whether or not you do it, it's kind of like a matter of the weaker brother, the stronger brother. And so let him who eats not judge him who doesn't. And him who doesn't eat, don't let him not judge him who does. That's kind of where I've tended to fall in some of those things that I think a lot of it for me has been having to know where my line is and what, because there's some things that I can watch that really don't bother me or disturb me in any way. Mass, really weird violence in horror movies, that's something I don't need to see. But like people killing each other, it's not really like bothersome to me at all. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because I've done it. No, I have never done it. I said maybe.
That the courts have been able to prove.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I'm willing.
3 for 3.
Yeah. So I don't know. I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I believe him when he says that he will be everywhere present and filling all things. I just don't know that I'm courageous enough to go looking in some places. So.
And you don't have to be.
Yeah, Steve is. He'll do it for me.
Let's do one more question, and then we'll do the top 5.
Let's just go straight to the top.
Or 0 questions and the top 5.
Hard hitting. All right, we doing it?
Let's do it.
All right. So the way we always end our fantastic podcast hour, let's go do our top 5. And our top 5 we thought about today, since we were talking about The Simpsons, and we've done this before with Star Wars. Let's do our top 5 Simpsons quotes.
Yep.
And I think it's my turn to start with number 5, right? Because we count down to number 1.
Yep.
Theoretically, right?
Although on the outline it says A.
Oh, that's like an internal document.
Oh. It's not for the people?
No. Despite what you said earlier. So with number 5 quotes, I'm going to go with, this is just a random little thing, because we talked about Ralphie a little bit
Yeah,
before.
I love Ralph Wiggum.
And there's this just random little scene in his Sunday school class where they're doing little illustrations, right? And the Sunday school teacher looks over Ralph's shoulder, and she says with kind of disappointment in her voice, "Ralph, Jesus did not have wheels." and I love that joke for so many reasons, right? I love
I
it
think
because
the line,
it's
by the way, is
absurd.
actually for the last time, Ralph. Jesus did not have wheels.
Which is even better.
For the last time.
I love it because it's absurd, right? Because in the imagination of this little boy, Jesus is some sort of like Voltron kind of figure who apparently like has stuff going on. But I love that line because it's one of the reasons why I love this character of Ralph, because Ralph is just so bless his heart, right? He's just so dim-witted and just sad, right? He's just like, but I think the thing that's great about him is that the more we see his kind of limitations and just the innocence that flows from it, the more you can't help but love him.
Yeah.
You know, it can't be done in this judgmental way. Like Ralph, God bless him, is this really innocent soul. And you know, if the best that he can offer is a Jesus with wheels, the best that he can offer is a Jesus with wheels. But he loves his father, he loves Lisa, he loves people, and he's just a genuinely good character. I don't know. I think there's a lesson there about not judging him, but actually like loving him stronger for his weaknesses, you know, and it being hopefully like a lighthearted teasing rather than a sort of derisive. Yeah. Laughing at rather than laughing with.
And Ralph is always so optimistic.
Yeah.
You know, like there's always just this hope that things are going to be okay for him.
I choose you.
So, do you like stuff?
Yeah, Ralph's the best. Okay, so quote number 4, or letter B. It's my outline
Number
says.
4.
There's an episode, I think it's a Treehouse of Horror, but I can't remember, where Homer dies. And he goes and stands before St. Peter on the way to get into heaven. And St. Peter is looking at his book and sees that Homer has never done a good deed in his whole life. And he's like, you know what, Homer, but I'm going to give you a chance. Just go back to Earth and do one good deed and I'll let you in. And so there's this exchange when Homer goes back to Earth and he goes and talks to Marge. He says, Marge, you got to help me. I have to do one good deed to get into heaven. And then Marge says, well, I got a whole list of chores. Clean the garage, paint the house. And then Homer says, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm just trying to get in. I'm not running for Jesus. And like, it's the best because I think, again, in as much as it holds a mirror up to us, right? That we kind of look at, like, what do I have to do just to be a nice person? Right? What do I have to do to be nice enough to kind of make the cut?
How do I pass the test?
Yeah, how do I pass the test? Whereas the reality is, we are running for Jesus. Like each one of us, right? We're called to put him on, to become him, to take up the cross, to deny ourselves, to follow him. And I definitely find myself thinking about, well, how do I just get in? How do I just get into heaven? But I don't know. I love the line because it is very revelatory, I think, of my own heart. I'm not running for Jesus.
Except you are.
Except I am, but I'm probably not. Yeah.
All right, number 3 on the list, I'm going with a Mr. Burns quote. So there's this episode where Homer is taking care of Mr. Burns in Smither's absence, and he brings him donuts to eat. He brings him like breakfast in bed or whatever it is. And Mr. Burns looks at Homer and he says, "Donuts? I told you I don't like ethnic food." I I love the character of Mr. Burns because he's such a stereotype of this like ridiculous, like he's just this fantastic parody of just unimaginable wealth and total out of touchness. Like he's a Yaley, right? And like I went to Yale for undergrad, and like I knew people who were kind of like that, except he's this overly distilled thing who just he loves his old timey sports, and he's just like this character that was alive in a different time and just still hasn't died yet because he's just so ancient. And but like he's so again it's not like a malicious judgment of the upper class or anything like that. It just kind of like pokes fun at their absurdity. And he's not a scary character. He's kind of a bad character, but he's more just like a pathetic character that we can laugh at, which I think is really the best way to approach Mr. Burns. He's just like such a ridiculous parody who's so out of touch that he sees donuts as ethnic food. Right. And I love that about him. He's just so. Like this is the guy who like has a vest made of African endangered rhino, right? And he has that whole song about
see my vest.
Yeah,
see my vest.
His closet that is full of like endangered animals. Like it's absurd.
Yeah,
right. It's so absurd and horrifying that you have to laugh at it, which is sometimes the only way that you can deal with things. You have to laugh at the absurd and horrifying.
Yes. In the Simpsons movie, he had a really great line too, where. I don't know if any of you guys ever saw the movie, but what happens is they go under this environmental attack, or they're a hazard. Sorry, they're a hazard to the rest of the environment. Springfield is, and so they put it in a dome, and then all the power goes out. But since Mr. Burns has the nuclear power plant and he can kind of control all the power, Homer goes to him to beg that he'll share the power, and Burns just goes, "At last, the rich white man has all the power." So great. Okay, so number 2 is the episode when I think they visit a petting zoo, and Lisa pets a lamb and suddenly realizes where meat comes from. And so she decides to become a vegetarian. So the exchange goes where Lisa says, "I'm going to become a vegetarian." Homer says, "Does that mean that you're not going to eat any pork?" "Yes." "Bacon?" "Yes, Dad." "Ham?" "Dad, all those meats come from the same animal." "Right, Lisa, some wonderful, magical animal." And again, I mean, you talk about the disconnect of Burns from just kind of the other classes. I mean, this is in America in general. I feel we're so disconnected from our food production, and Homer I think reveals that in a big way. And I don't know. There was a time when I was really into reading Wendell Berry, and I still really love Wendell Berry, but I read him it was about the only thing that I read for a while. And he talks a lot about this problem where we're so disconnected kind of from our life and our role in God's creation. And I think again Homer reveals that in this really fantastically kind of witty, sharp line of some wonderful magical animal.
That's awesome. So, and going to the next one, keep in mind this is the same person. I'm pulling another Homer quote. Lisa makes a science project, and she attempts to make a perpetual motion machine, and she brings the machine into the bed, and she puts it on the bed, and she starts it, and it just goes faster and faster and faster. And Homer shouts at her, and he says, "Lisa, in this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics." Which I love because, yes, we all obey the laws of thermodynamics. But that's a cool thing, again, about the character of Homer, that there's always more than meets the eye. And this bumbling oaf who can't tell that pork and ham and bacon all come from the same animal can refer to like Newtonian physics. And that's why I like that. Like he's more than meets the eye, and it's a reminder to hopefully all of us that there's more to us than meets the eye. That we're all running for Jesus, right?
Yep. Indeed we are. Well,
next time, let's do this with way less people in the room.
I agree. I agree.
And scene.
That's it. Thank you.